It's a perfect way to enhance the taste of your family's favorite foods. Sunflower cooking oil is more than just oil. It's the key to bring your family together over a delicious meal and making every bite taste better. Remember, the key ingredient to a great family meal is sunflower. Tradition just tastes better.
People of Palestine need your support now. African Muslims Agency is on the ground, already providing food, medication, and emergency supplies in Gaza. Donate any amount to Heal Palestine at africanmuslimsagency.co.za. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Ibrahim Dada from the Islamic Dawah Movement of Southern Africa, IDM. Please join us for a pledge line on Friday, 14th June on Straight Talk with Siraj Basa at 7 p.m. We are raising funds for a masjid in the Kwapata Township in KZN. Shukran, Jazakallah khair.
The Breakfast Rush, brought to you courtesy of the Willow Tin Group, at the forefront of innovation and one of the leading competitors in the South African FMCG market.
The MK party has asked the Constitutional Court to interdict Friday's National Assembly sitting. The party says the IEC was premature in declaring the 2024 election results free and fair. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo declared on Monday the first sitting of the 7th Parliament will be on the 14th of June, while the first sitting of the National Council of Provinces will be on the 15th of June. Proceedings are set to go ahead without the presence of the MK party. Now, as I mentioned earlier, South Africa is heading into a space that we've not been in previously. Joining us this morning is Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer Mbekezeli Benjamin. We're live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and live inside your radio as well. Mbekezeli Benjamin, good morning and thank you for being so patient. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, Shan, and thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program. Now, from what I could gather from the MK party's application to the Constitutional Court, is that its application is based on Section 46 of the Constitution, which speaks about the composition of the National Assembly. Can you give us a brief understanding into this section?
Yes, so Section 46 of the Constitution speaks about the composition of the National Assembly. And the composition of the National Assembly, the National Assembly is obviously one half of Parliament. The other half is the National Council of Provinces. What Section 46 says is that, well, there are two parts to it. The first part, it says the National Assembly is made up of between 350 and 400 members. So that is the first part. The second part says that the Parliament must pass a law or an act that sets out a formula for determining how that between that 350 and 400. So that act was passed in 1998. It's called the Electoral Act. And the Electoral Act sets out a formula which says for every 100,000 South Africans, there needs to be one member of Parliament. So the minute that our national population reached 40 million, that means we could only have 400 members of Parliament. We couldn't have any less, we couldn't have any more. So that is the composition, and that composition is determined during the election. So when after the election results are announced, each party is allocated seats. The ANC has 159 seats, the DA has 88 seats, and the MK party has 58 seats. So those seats have been allocated to the specific people which were nominated by their parties. So all of those people, all 58 members of the MK party are currently members of Parliament. Now, what the MK party is arguing in its court papers is to say that if those 58 people don't attend the sitting of Parliament on Friday, then Parliament cannot go ahead because Parliament is not properly constituted. But that is a misreading of the Constitution, because Parliament was already constituted with 400 members by the time the election results were announced. So on Friday, whether they attend or not, Parliament can still go ahead with its business because it will be properly constituted.
Now, the National Assembly sitting is scheduled for Friday, which is 2 days away. Do you foresee any prospect of success for the MK's party application?
Well, I don't see them succeeding. Firstly, because of how close it is to the actual date. The Constitutional Court is unlikely to be able to read the MK Party application and process it in time for the sitting on Friday. So I don't think they will succeed in getting the Constitutional Court to stop Parliament from proceeding. But also on a more substantive basis, legally, it is extremely hard to get an interdict generally, but it's even harder to get an interdict against another arm of state. So what the MK Party is asking the judiciary or the Constitutional Court to do is to interfere with the proceedings or the processes of Parliament. So it is what they are asking is for one arm of state to interfere with another arm of state, and that would be in breach of the separation of powers. So it is only in very, very special and exceptional cases where that is possible, and you need a very solid argument, you need very solid evidence, and in this case, unfortunately, the MK doesn't seem to have put up that kind of evidence or those kinds of arguments for them to succeed.
If you're just tuned in right now, you're listening to The Breakfast Rush on Radio Al Ansar and delving into the MK Party and its request now to the Constitutional Court to interdict the 7th Parliament sitting. Chatting at the moment on the subject with Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer Mbekezeli Benjamin. Let's look at the hypothetical situation. So hypothetically, let's say the court does grant the MK Party's interdict. What events are likely to unfold in that scenario?
So if hypothetically the Constitutional Court does grant the MK the interdict, what will likely happen is that the proceedings on Friday, of course, cannot go ahead. They will have to be paused for the Constitutional Court to then deal with the second part of what the MK is asking for. What the MK is asking essentially is for the whole entire election to be set aside. That is because they believe there was some irregularity or some fraud that was done during the vote counting, and so they believe that the whole elections should be set aside. So the difficulty with that argument is that there is already a process that is set out in the law of how to challenge the outcomes of an election. And the first step of that process is to file an objection with the Electoral Commission. And they were supposed to file that objection on the Friday of the election. So on the 31st of May, they were supposed to file that objection, and I understand that they did. And then the IEC gave an outcome to that objection on the Sunday, the 2nd of June. Now, if any party is not happy with the outcome that the IEC gives on the objection, then they are supposed to take that issue on appeal to the Electoral Court. Now, the timelines for that was 3 days after the decision. So by Wednesday last week, the MK Party was required to file its court papers, including all of its evidence, at the Electoral Court. From what they say, they did not do that. And so the loophole or the option for them to challenge the outcome of the results was closed last week at 9 o'clock when they didn't file their court papers. So what they are essentially asking the Constitutional Court to do is to short circuit that entire process and try to reverse the outcomes of the election at the Constitutional Court level. And the Constitutional Court, unfortunately, cannot do that because the Constitutional Court cannot hear evidence, for example. You can't bring evidence or witnesses to testify at the Constitutional Court level. So that is the difficulty that the MK Party is facing. But yes, on a hypothetical basis, they can win on postponing the sitting on Friday, but they cannot win on the full merits of the case.
Before approaching the courts, the party wrote to Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in an attempt to stop the sitting. What role does he play in the process?
So the Chief Justice plays a narrow role in this process. What he's required to do in terms of Section 51 of the Constitution is firstly to receive the list of the names who are going to be members of Parliament. He received that list last week on Thursday, and then he's supposed to work with the Secretary to the National Assembly to arrange for the first sitting of both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. That happened, he announced the sitting on Monday for the sitting to happen on Friday and Saturday. Friday is the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. So on Friday, his role is to preside over the election of the Speaker and the election of the President, and also the election of the National Council of, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. So the political parties will send their representatives, and then the Chief Justice will preside over all of them taking their oath of office. And after they've taken their oath of office, then he has to preside over the election of the President and the election of the Speaker. And that will be the end of his role. He can't do anything beyond that.
Final question for this morning. Parliament has made it clear that the National Assembly will sit on Friday, where it's expected to elect a president and a speaker. If this is not possible, what would that mean for the country?
Well, there are a number of consequences that will arise. Firstly, it is important to emphasize that the only thing that will stop Parliament from going ahead is if the Constitutional Court, within the next 3 days, granting an interdict to stop it. So if there is no interdict, then the proceedings will go ahead. But let's say the proceedings don't go ahead. The Constitution does contemplate this situation. Firstly, the sitting must either happen on Friday. If it doesn't happen on Friday, it can be postponed to 7 days from Friday, which is the following Friday. If it still doesn't proceed, then within 30 days, the President will then have the opportunity to dissolve Parliament. And that is quite a drastic step. And if the President does dissolve Parliament, then there must be new elections within 90 days of that decision by the President to dissolve Parliament. But that is the worst case scenario, that we will go to another election within the 90 days. But again, there needs to be a few things that will reach that point, including the court interdict and including the Parliament not sitting next week.
I want to thank you for your time this morning and your insights into the subject at hand, and wish you a wonderful day forward.
Thank you very much. Salam.
That was Judges Matter Research and Advocacy Officer Mbekezeli Benjamin joining us on the program, giving us some insights into the subject at hand. So it seems like Friday and Saturday will go as planned with the the election of the president. We'll find out who, as if we don't already know, we'll find out who the president of the country is going to be, who's going to be the Speaker of Parliament. So first sitting of the 7th Parliament anticipated on the 14th of June, and the first sitting of the National Council of Provinces anticipated on the 15th of June. It's the country that we live in. We have to be interested in the way that it is developing. And obviously, we here at Radio Al-Ansar will keep an eye on these stories as they break. Now, it's coming for 7:25, which means you can do this.